Hey there! Thanks for tuning in to DuckBricks. I'm Chris, and for my 2K subscriber special, I asked you the viewers what kinds of videos do you want to see from this channel. There were a ton of really great suggestions, and I'm working through that, but one of the most common suggestions was asking me to do a tutorial on how I hang my sets from the ceiling. And so that's exactly what this video is. I'll be walking you through exactly how to do so and what materials you need to get started and do this in your own homes. And really, the sky's the limit. In the tutorial today, I'll be showing you how to hang a relatively small set, but as you can see behind me, you can hang things as big as the UCS Star Destroyer or the UCS Millennium Falcon, or as fragile as some of the mocks from Rebrickable. After I go in depth into one specific example, I'll be showcasing different aspects of my collection that are hanging from the ceiling and giving some tips and tricks as to how I managed to hang them, because it is, of course, different for every single model you do. But without further ado, let's just jump right in and get started. Alright, so the procedure is basically the same whether you're hanging up something relatively small like this or even hanging up something really big like a UCS style Star Wars ship. Essentially what you have to do is get a regular piece of fishing line right here and try to hook it around such that you have enough length to support it for going twice as high as you want. And the reason for this is because you actually want to do 2 loops to support it at 2 different ends to prevent it from falling or rotating or whatnot. So once I've got the string here, let's say I want to hang it at about this height. So I have about double that. Let's do a little extra to be safe. I'm just going to cut the string right here. And to do a knot, if we bring the camera up closer, we can zoom in on the knot here. The best way to do a knot like this is to just take the 2 ends of the string and tie it in a knot. Do not attempt to just try to knot it like this. It's far easier to take both ends like so and tie it in a standard knot, just like this. Tie it once, tie it twice, and if you're working with a UCS style ship or something really heavy, I'd tie it 3 times, although 2 is usually good enough. And just like that, you can have a pretty good support here. You'll notice that if I take the other ends and I try to really rip that off, that's not going to come off, even if I really try to pull it. So that's pretty good. And then what you want to do is you hook it onto one end, flip it around, and hook this up through the front end. And now, once I get the string wrapped around the bottom here, we have a pretty good loop that can hang this ship. Now if I just detach the stand, you'll notice that this is relatively well balanced on its own. If for some reason it is tipping to the front or the back, just try to adjust the string so it's hooking it at a different angle. So you'll notice that moving this back actually caused the front to tip forwards more, so I do not want to do that. And instead I'll just move this a little bit more forwards so I can have a pretty balanced kind of hang right here. And you can see that if I had a hook, this would work perfectly just hung up like so. One other major thing to note here is that it's really easy to be able to hang it in a perfect position if you can kind of estimate the center of gravity of the model. If you'll notice, there's a heavier part up in front, so I have my strings positioned a little bit closer to the front than to the back. And if you recall, when I moved the string to the back, it started to tip forwards. So just try to eyeball where the center of gravity would be on the model, in which case you can get it in a perfectly level angle. Unless, of course, you want to hang it at an angle, like it's a ship that's swooping or diving upwards or downwards, then you'd have to play around with it a little bit more and try to be more creative. But just for a straight on angle, this is all you have to do. Alright, so for hanging stuff from the ceiling, I typically use 2 types of hooks. One of them is a much larger style of hook that I use for really any Lego set larger than, I would say, $60 to $70. Of course, your mileage may vary, but the larger you go, the larger hooks you want to use. And then I have a smaller kind for smaller Lego sets. You can see right here the size difference. And obviously for the Nebulon B, which I just strung up, I will be using the smaller size. But you can zoom in very close on the labels of these in case you want to buy your own. That being said, really any style of hook that can screw into a wall will work. These are just the particular ones that I happen to use. If you are hanging up something large, I would recommend using a beam finder in order to find a wooden beam that runs across your ceiling to be able to make sure that you don't actually pull down the drywall by hanging up something really heavy. The way that beam finders like this work, and you can find a ton of these like this on Amazon, is you just go up to your ceiling and there's a button on the side or on the front or whatnot, and you essentially just move it across the ceiling until you can really see this light up and you can find a long beam that runs across your ceiling. So let's just do this as an example. I'm going to move up here and you can see I've pressed and held on the beam, but there is no beam yet. There's a beam finder here, and I cannot find a beam yet. If I just move this across, you can see that it lights up and beeps when I have located the beam, and moves away. There is no more beam. So I know that the beam is located about it right here, and it's probably around this length or this length, depending on where I can move it around. So just play around with this device, and it's very simple to be able to find a beam. And again, if you're hanging up something really heavy, I would highly recommend that you use this in order to make sure that you don't do serious damage to your ceiling by pulling down drywall. But for now, we are just hanging up the Nebulon, so let's just take it off right here. And it's a very simple process. You take the hook and you kind of eyeball where exactly you want it to go. Let's just readjust it here. And you screw this into the ceiling and you're good to go. So I'm going to put it up alongside the Tantive 4s here. Probably around, let's say, here is good. So let's just screw this in here. All right. Then we can get this up, and voila, there you go. You have your first ship hanging from the ceiling like so. It's a very simple process, but be sure to figure out exactly how your beam finder works. If you do plan to hang something that is remotely heavy, you must use a beam finder to make sure it doesn't pull off the drywall. And again, here are the hooks that I use in case you want to try it out yourself with your stuff at home. If you're starting off by just hanging official LEGO sets, you generally don't need to worry too much about parts falling off. After all, if a child can play with it in a really rough manner, then you can hang it from your ceiling just fine. That being said, especially when you get into UCS sets, you do have to be relatively careful about where you place the string, because of course these sets are not designed to have string hanging off of them. Oftentimes, for large sets like UCS style sets, you have to find generally large Technic structures within the model and try to rope your fishing line around the model like I've done with the UCS Star Destroyer here. If you'll notice, when I go around the back, I've actually hung it up by two separate string. You can see a loop of string there and a loop of string over there, hung up from two separate hooks just because of the unique Technic structure of this model didn't allow me to just use one string and hang it from a single hook. Even with stuff like booster rings right here, you do have to be careful about how you mount stuff just because of the fragility of some of the side plates. Try to make sure to optimize exactly what you're doing around any Technic frame in the model, if present, and go from there. That being said, many sets do not have Technic frames, like for example these X-Wings, but then again, these are sturdy enough such that you can hang string from them, and it's generally just fine. If we move over to some of the Bionicle vehicles over here, the fact that they are Technic makes it so much better because, again, you don't really have to worry about parts falling off, and that counts doubly so for these. You can really just place them wherever you want and just try to hang string like so. A good example of this is you can see I've done a front loop of the string here and the back loop around the back engine, and then Antros' ship, the Jetrax T6, is hanging up perfectly fine. For really complex stuff like the Death Star 1 and 2, I've had to be a little bit creative in terms of how I've hung stuff up. If you'll notice, I have wrapped a string around a series of plates on the underside of the Death Star, and I'm using the string to go directly through the main elevator shaft in the model to just hang from the top. Then again, you can't really control the direction here, so you can spin the Death Star freely, but it generally will settle at a certain fixed spot, as you can see right here. I've done a slightly similar thing to the Death Star 2, except this one was much easier because of the Technic beam running through the middle of it, which allowed me to just really be able to cover it in all directions. Now, it gets a little bit more complicated if you're hanging custom models like the ones found on BrickVault. You can see one of the Delta 7 interceptors here. This is a remarkable model, but also extremely fragile. And my one advice for this is just to be really careful to make sure you don't really break the model while you're doing so, especially with fragile MOCs. You can see its counterpart right here. It can be very easy to break stuff off if you're working with MOCs, so I would recommend just be very careful in terms of where you place your string. Another example of this is the Naboo Starfighter, also from BrickVault. You can see it all the way up here, and yes, it is very fragile, but I've managed to place a string such that it's a weight-bearing spot relatively close to the center of mass for the model, and it won't fall down very easily. In fact, it's been hanging up for a long time, and I've had no issues with the way it's hanging. But now let's say for our final example here, you want to mount something along the side of the wall like I've done with the two Ultimate Collector Series Millennium Falcons, which you can see here. Now the process of doing this is pretty much the same. I found a beam alongside the side of the wall. You can see a hook right there that's hanging it in, and this string is just attached to the Technic frame on the inside of the ship. Again, you can see right here, this is just attached to a hook all the way in the back there, and it's just going straight down into a Technic frame. The plate is literally just hung on by friction between the plate and a few other LEGO system tiles that I've placed on the backside of it. The same goes for pretty much all of these Millennium Falcons. The string simply wraps around the back of them and allows me to hang them like so. In fact, you can't even see exactly where I've hung this one. Because of just how I've placed the string on the Technic frame, it looks like it's just sitting there, which is ideal. And for these Batmobiles, something slightly different has been done. You can see if you look very close, I've actually just put screws on the inside of the wall, and I'm using the screws to balance the models like so. It works really well if the models have a Technic base that you can literally just screw the screws in, but if they don't, it works just fine just screwing it in and letting it balance like so. It doesn't have to look the prettiest because when you zoom out, you can't even tell that the screws are there. So, that is a very quick tutorial on how to hang up stuff from the ceiling. I hope that you find this helpful if you wish to hang stuff from your ceiling as well. And again, if you have any questions about how I hung a particular model, I have almost every single LEGO Star Wars ship hung. I also have every single Flying Ninjago set hanging from the ceiling, as well as the Batman sets, and some LEGO movie stuff and official space stuff as well. So if you do have any questions, just let me know and I'll try to figure out, and I'll send you some pictures of exactly how I hung it in my collection. Thank you all for tuning into DuckBricks, and stay tuned for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Thanks, and bye-bye for now.